The arena was a coliseum of impossible scale, its walls stretching miles into the sky, shimmering with energy fields that contained the violent spectacle within. Thousands of alien species filled the stands, their bioluminescent eyes gleaming with excitement. This was not just entertainment. It was a declaration of supremacy. The Tournament of Supremacy, a brutal contest designed to determine the dominant force in the galaxy. The reigning champions, the Varkle, stood at the center, their massive reptilian forms exuding raw power. 8 feet tall, thick with muscle. Their claws could shear through armor, their reflexes too fast for any known species to counter. Their victories were so absolute that no one had dared challenge them in a decade. The Zelnari, the aristocratic rulers of the tournament, sat in their elevated viewing platforms, watching with smug satisfaction. To them, the event was a mere formality. Then the humans arrived. The crowd murmured in confusion as a group of smaller, fragile-looking creatures stepped onto the battlefield. Their armor was lighter than that of any warrior species. No natural weapons, no claws, no enhanced musculature, just flesh and bone, wrapped in technology far inferior to what the Zelnari deemed acceptable. Their leader, Commander Elias Grant, stood at the front, scanning the arena with cold, calculating eyes. Laughter erupted from Varkle, one of their warriors. A behemoth with scarred scales stepped forward and roared, his voice rattling the ground. "You send prey to fight predators?" he mocked. "This is not a battle. It is slaughter." The Zelnari overlords merely nodded, their amusement evident. "Humans," one of them mused. "How quaint." The announcer's voice echoed across the arena. "Begin." The Varkle charged. It was supposed to be over in seconds. A single swipe from those monstrous claws would reduce a human to ribbons. But something unexpected happened. The first Varkle lunged at a human soldier, only to collapse face first into the dirt. The crowd went silent. No one had seen it happen. But there he was, struggling to rise, his thick tail thrashing in frustration. Grant adjusted his stance, stepping back from the fallen warrior. "Basic physics," he muttered. The Zelnari leaned forward. The playback revealed what had happened. The human had not blocked, dodged, or overpowered the Varkle. Instead, he had redirected the attack. A perfect use of leverage, exploiting the Varkle's overconfidence and momentum to send him crashing down. The second warrior attacked, expecting a different result. The human dodged, fluid and efficient, striking behind the knee, a weak spot. The Varkle stumbled, unbalanced. Another human stepped in, striking with precise, controlled force. The reptilian champion fell again. The silence among the alien spectators turned uneasy. The Zelnari lord who had mocked humanity now frowned. Something was wrong. The Varkle were stronger, faster, biologically superior in every way. But they were losing. The battle raged on, but the outcome became more and more apparent. Humans weren't winning through brute force. They were outmaneuvering, outthinking, outlasting. Where aliens relied on instinct, humans adapted. Where other species followed predictable patterns, humans disrupted them. Then came the moment that changed everything. The Varkle champion, a warrior undefeated for 2 decades, stepped forward. 8 feet of raw carnage, his claws coated in the blood of 1,000 challengers. He charged like a force of nature. The human in his path didn't move. He waited. A fraction of a second before impact, he sidestepped, caught the Varkle's arm, and used his own strength against him, flipping the monstrous warrior over his shoulder. The ground shook as the champion landed. The arena gasped. The impossible had happened. A human had thrown a Varkle. The Zelnari rulers exchanged glances. This was not supposed to happen. The human stood over the fallen champion, adjusting his stance. "Your mistake," he said, his voice carrying through the silence, "was assuming strength is all that matters." The Varkle roared in humiliation, but he did not rise again. For the first time in history, the Tournament of Supremacy had taken an unexpected turn. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The next challenge was a test of tactics, a battle of minds rather than raw power. This was where the so-called superior species believed humans would fail. The Zelnari aristocrats observed from their golden platforms, their expressions unreadable. Their entire empire was built on the idea that intelligence followed a rigid hierarchy, one where humans ranked near the bottom. The test was simple. 2 opposing teams, 1 battlefield, 1 objective. Victory required capturing the enemy's command center while protecting your own. The battlefield was a shifting maze of energy walls and fluctuating gravity zones, meant to confuse and disorient the participants. The competing teams took their places. The Varkle, dominant in sheer power, relied on overwhelming their opponents through brute force. The Skari, an insectoid race known for their hive mind coordination, had flawless synchronization, able to move as a single entity. Other species had their own strengths. Some had advanced weaponry. Others had near telepathic coordination. The humans, they had no genetic advantages, no hive mind, no superior tech. Just a handful of soldiers, armed with nothing but standard-issue combat gear and instinct. The match began. As expected, the Varkle charged immediately, smashing through walls, forcing their way forward. The Skari executed a perfectly synchronized maneuver, splitting into 2 groups, flanking both sides of the battlefield. The other species adapted as best they could, each following their own rigid doctrines of warfare. The humans did something no one expected. They vanished. The Zelnari nobles watched in confusion. "Where are they?" one of them murmured. The announcers scoured the battlefield, searching for the missing human team. Then, one by one, alien combatants began dropping out. The first Skari soldier collapsed, his systems overloaded by a feedback loop in his neural relay. The second fell when an energy trap was set off in a zone the humans had already abandoned. A Varkle warrior, normally impervious to injury, stumbled forward, his balance compromised by a makeshift pitfall. The Zelnari lords leaned forward, intrigued. The humans had never planned to meet their enemies head-on. Instead, they had dissected the battlefield like a puzzle, analyzing patterns, weaknesses, and blind spots. While the other teams focused on force, the humans focused on control. They led their enemies exactly where they wanted them. When the remaining alien teams finally realized what was happening, it was too late. The human commander issued the final order. Now! A series of coordinated disruptions triggered across the battlefield, sonic grenades detonating in precise locations, enemy communication lines severed, electromagnetic pulses disabling tech-dependent species. Within minutes, the battlefield was cleared. The human flag was planted at the enemy's command center. Victory. Silence filled the Colosseum. No one had ever won like this. Other species had claimed victory through sheer strength, through technological superiority, through ruthless aggression. But no one had ever torn the enemy apart without directly engaging them. The Zelnari exchanged uneasy glances. This was not how wars were supposed to be fought. The next trial arrived, a battle against an autonomous AI system designed to counter and overwhelm enemy strategies. This AI had defeated countless species, adapting to every move, predicting every tactic. The aliens fought the way they fought everything else, directly. The AI countered every attack, every strategy, every formation. It outpaced, outmaneuvered, and outmatched every species that came before it. The combatants fell one by one, overwhelmed by an intelligence that could calculate 1,000 possible outcomes before they even made their next move. Then the humans entered. The AI observed them, analyzing their movements, processing their fighting patterns. It predicted their strategies and adjusted accordingly, except it couldn't. The humans didn't follow a pattern. They moved erratically, making illogical, counterintuitive choices. Feints within feints. A strategy that wasn't strategy. The AI hesitated. Its algorithms couldn't adapt because there was nothing to adapt to. Then the humans took it apart. Not through brute force. Not through superior firepower. They hacked its decision-making process. They fed it false data, manipulated its sensors, overloaded its predictive algorithms with contradictory movements. The AI glitched, stalled, and shut down. A deep unease settled over the Zelnari lords. These creatures, the ones they had dismissed as biological anomalies, had just outmaneuvered the most advanced strategic system in the known galaxy. The next challenge was a test of endurance. A labyrinth of shifting walls, brutal environmental hazards, and starvation tactics. It was meant to grind warriors down, forcing a fight amongst themselves for survival. The aliens followed their instincts. They treated it like every other trial, as a competition. They fought each other, betraying alliances, cutting down the weak to ensure their own survival. The humans, they helped each other. They shared supplies. They coordinated. They built paths through the chaos, rather than just enduring it. While the aliens weakened themselves through infighting, the humans moved forward as a unit. For the first time, a Zelnari noble spoke with something close to fear. They are not stronger than us. They are not faster, but they are something else. The tournament was meant to prove superiority. Instead, it had proven something far worse. The humans weren't just competing. They were rewriting the rules. The next challenge was a battle unlike any before. Not a contest of strength, endurance, or tactics. This was a test of sheer adaptability. The Zelnari had designed this event for one purpose: to force species to fight in an environment that would constantly change. What worked one second would fail the next. The battlefield was unstable, unpredictable, and lethal. Gravity fluctuated without warning. One moment, warriors fought under intense weight, barely able to move. Then, suddenly, they were flung into the air, unable to control their trajectory. The terrain was alive, shifting beneath their feet, creating hazards with no pattern. The air itself became an enemy. Temperature spikes, oxygen depletion, pockets of deadly radiation. The purpose was clear: who could adapt the fastest? The alien champions were formidable in their own right. The Varkal, despite their brute force mindset, had an innate resistance to extreme environmental shifts. The Skari, with their hive intelligence, could share real-time data and adjust their movements instantly. The Drexer, an amphibious species, could survive in almost any condition by altering their metabolism. Humans had nothing, no biological advantages, no evolutionary traits designed for extreme survival. They were the weakest species in the arena, and yet within minutes, it became clear they were the only ones who had truly prepared. While the aliens fought against the battlefield, the humans moved with it. When gravity shifted, the Varkal tried to brace themselves, but the humans used it, redirecting movement, launching themselves exactly where they needed to go. When the air thinned, the other species struggled to adjust their breathing, but the humans had already predicted it, rationing oxygen, using controlled respiration techniques. The aliens relied on what they were born with. Humans relied on what they had learned, and it made all the difference. The Zelnari observers watched in silence. What they were witnessing shouldn't have been possible. Every species had a limit, a threshold where they could no longer adapt. Humans somehow had none. Then came the final phase of the challenge, the Predator trial. The arena's shifting environment froze, replaced by complete and utter darkness. A silence fell over the battlefield. Then the sound began, a low, guttural growl. Something was hunting them, a species that none of them had ever encountered before, a creature bred specifically for extermination. It had no name, no weakness, no pattern. It had slaughtered entire warrior species in previous tournaments, wiping out every champion before it. The aliens reacted in the only way they knew how. The Varkal formed a defensive circle, baring their claws. The Skari tried to coordinate movements, but their hive mind couldn't process an enemy they couldn't see. The Drexer, despite their adaptability, panicked. The first kill happened in seconds. A Varkal vanished into blackness, his scream cut short. The Skari broke formation, scattering in confusion. More warriors disappeared, their deaths marked only by the sound of something tearing through flesh and armor. The Predator was unstoppable. Then, something unexpected happened. A voice cut through the darkness. Human, calm, focused, track the sound, map the movements. Breathe slow, count the intervals. While the other species were panicking, the humans were analyzing. They didn't run. They didn't lash out blindly. They waited. Then a single shot rang out. The darkness split with a flash of light. The Predator screeched in pain. It wasn't dead, but it was wounded. And suddenly, it wasn't hunting anymore. It was being hunted. Humans didn't need superior strength. They didn't need natural weapons. They had something far more dangerous. They had strategy. Within minutes, the humans turned the hunt against the predator. They forced it into a trap, using its own patterns against it. Every alien in the arena watched in stunned silence as something that had never been defeated before fell. The challenge ended. The Zelnari nobles did not speak, because for the first time, the humans had not just won. They had shattered the very idea of what superiority meant. The tournament was over. The final challenge had ended with an outcome that no one had predicted. No one except the humans. Every other species had competed to prove they were the strongest, the fastest, the most dominant. The humans had done something else entirely. They had changed the game. Now, they stood in the center of the Grand Colosseum, surrounded by an uneasy silence. The once rowdy alien crowd, the same ones who had mocked and dismissed them, watched in stunned disbelief. Even the Varkul, the so-called apex warriors of the galaxy, remained silent, their massive forms tense with a realization that unsettled them to their core. The Zelnari overlords sat in their elevated thrones, their faces expressionless, but behind their calculated exteriors, something far more dangerous stirred. Not admiration, not curiosity, fear. For millennia, the Zelnari had controlled the narrative of the galaxy. They had dictated the hierarchy, deciding which species thrived and which were doomed to remain insignificant. The tournament of supremacy had never been about competition. It was about maintaining order. Every species that entered was meant to either confirm their superiority or reinforce their inferiority. Humans had done neither. Instead, they had proven something far worse. The hierarchy was a lie. A Zelnari noble finally spoke, his voice carefully neutral. Your performance was unexpected. Commander Elias Grant met his gaze without flinching. You underestimated us. The noble's lips pressed into a thin line. Perhaps, but do not mistake victory in a contest for significance in the galaxy. There is more to power than winning games. Grant tilted his head slightly. If this was just a game, then why do you all look so nervous? A ripple went through the assembly. The alien spectators shifted, murmuring in hushed tones. The Varkul warriors clenched their fists, as if realizing the implications for the first time. The Skari twitched their antennae in rapid, frantic movements, an undeniable sign of distress. Because the truth was obvious now. Humans weren't stronger. They weren't faster. They weren't genetically superior. And yet, they had won. And if they could win here, what else could they win? The Zelnari noble's voice dropped into something cold. Your species has made an impression that is both admirable and dangerous. Grant didn't react. Dangerous to who? The noble smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. To those who do not like change. A different Zelnari, older and far more calculating, finally leaned forward. His gaze was piercing, analyzing. Tell me, human, what is it that makes your kind so adaptable, so unpredictable? Grant didn't answer right away. He could feel the weight of the entire arena pressing down on him. Thousands of alien eyes locked onto him, waiting for an answer that could define humanity's place in the galaxy. Finally, he spoke, because we don't believe in limits. The noble narrowed his eyes. Elaborate. Grant exhaled slowly, choosing his words carefully. Every species here fights within the boundaries of what they were born with. Strength, intelligence, biology, you all assume those things define what's possible. Humans don't. We don't accept the rules we're given. We break them, rewrite them, adapt to what we need to be. He let that sink in before delivering the final blow. And that's why, no matter how many times you try to put us at the bottom of your hierarchy, we will always find a way to reach the top. The silence that followed was absolute. And in that moment, the humans knew they had done more than win a tournament. They had just declared war on the idea that the galaxy belonged to anyone but them. The Zelnari noble smiled again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the smile of a ruler addressing an inferior. It was a smile of someone who had just realized a new challenger had entered the game. And for the first time in history, the galaxy understood that humans were never prey. They were the storm that would change everything.